The Redmagic 10 Pro recently released in the global market. It is the most powerful smartphone I have ever tested, and it packs in some serious improvements over its predecessor. In its newly redesigned box, you'll find the device itself, a corrugated hard-shell case, a 6-amp charging cable, and an 80-watt charging block, even though the phone can actually charge at 100 watts. The 10 Pro has already gone on sale in the global market, and it starts at just $649 for the base model. The base model comes with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage and is only available in the shadow color, which is not transparent. Up from that is 16 gigs of RAM with 512 gigs of storage, which will set you back an extra $150. This can be picked up in dusk or moonlight. The top end variant comes with an insane 24 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage, which comes in at $999 and is only available in the dusk color. These are the exact same prices the Redmagic 9 series cost when they first launched, which is crazy. And if you'd like to pick one up, be sure to check out the link down below. It still has a similar boxy design, but the backplate is now more transparent with almost vignette looking edges. There's less text on the back, the camera system is still tucked under the glass panel for a completely flat back, and there are still loads of customizable RGB LEDs. The Redmagic logo is now lit up, as well as the X, which is the Roman numeral for 10, since this is their 10th generation phone. The RGB turbofan is also still illuminated, but it now spins even faster at 23,000 RPM. The fan is part of an improved cooling system, which includes an upgraded vapor chamber, and in between these two components sits a new solid-state piece of liquid metal to further improve heat dissipation. This is the first smartphone ever to do this. The touch triggers are also lit up and offer the same 520Hz touch sampling rate. And on this side of the device, you'll find the exclusive red textured game space switch, which can still be used for Redmagic's game space, but it can also be customized to perform different tasks, such as change to different sound profiles. I opted to keep this as a mute switch, since you can easily enter game space from the control center. At the top, there's an IR blaster, and next to it sits a headphone jack. This is one of the few flagships out there that still include a jack. And next to that sits its first speaker. The second one is at the bottom, which makes up its 3D 1115K dual speaker system with DTS:X Ultra and Snapdragon sound. The SIM tray supports dual 5G SIM cards, but there's still no eSIM support. And lastly, there's a USB 3.2 Type-C port, which doubles up as a display port. There's still NFC, and haptic feedback is still top-notch thanks to its super linear motor. The flat side rails are still made from aviation aluminum, and they have still managed to keep the thickness and weight the same, even though it now has a larger screen. The screen itself is protected by Gorilla Glass, and of course there's still an optical in-display fingerprint sensor which works decently. There's still an under-display selfie camera which is barely visible, and overall dimensions are identical, even with a larger display, since somehow they managed to slim down the bezels even more, coming in at just 1.25mm thin all around the panel, which means the screen to body ratio now sits at an insane 95.3%. That's the highest screen to body ratio ever seen in a smartphone. Companies like Apple and Samsung could learn a thing or two from this futuristic looking device. As I just mentioned, the flat AMOLED display is now larger, coming in at 6.85 inches, but that's not the only thing that's changed. It now has a higher 1.5K screen resolution, and it's significantly brighter at 2000 nits. There's still no LTPO technology here, but the refresh rate has now bumped up to 144 Hz, and its instant touch sampling rate has jumped up to 2500 Hz. Of course, the cherry on top of all of this is that under-display camera, which means you'll be getting a fully immersive all-screen experience. Another upgrade is its battery, and its dual cell design now sits at a massive 7050 mAh capacity, and its wire charging speed has also increased up to 100 watts, but for some weird reason, only an 80 watt block is bundled in the box. The good news is you can still charge it at 80 watts, but unfortunately due to its design, there is still no room for wireless charging. Of course, this wouldn't be the most powerful smartphone if it didn't pack in the most powerful chipset. So at its core sits the Snapdragon 8 Elite CPU, which clocks in at a PC level of 4.32 GHz. The new Adreno 830 GPU comes in at 1.1 GHz, and this is paired alongside Redmagic's dedicated Red Core 3 gaming chip, which further enhances performance and effects. Unlike other Snapdragon 8 Elite powered phones, the Redmagic 10 Pro makes use of LPDDR5X Ultra RAM, which is 13% faster than the standard LPDDR5X RAM, as well as UFS 4.1 Pro storage, which offers a 36% increase in read speed. All of this combined makes for some very impressive benchmark scores, but it didn't quite achieve the highest possible Antutu score due to its user experience score holding it back. That said, it really wasn't far off the best I've seen from this chipset, and it's still ahead of the Dimensity 9400. However, it crushed absolutely everything in Geekbench 6, 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, and 3D Mark Solar Bay, but fell just short in 3D Mark Steel Nomad Lite. But at the end of the day, benchmarks are just numbers. What makes this device stand out from the rest are its insane amount of gaming features and of course its gaming performance. Hopping into GameSpace using the dedicated switch or shortcut in Control Center opens up your gaming world. Once you're in, you'll notice the GameSpace home looks identical to last year's, and yes, you can still customize its look, use Redmagic's mascot Mora, and toggle game-specific settings. Once in-game, you can still bring in the overlay and gain access to all the same features as before, such as charge bypass, Diablo mode, and enable the info panel to see real-time FPS. You can of course still customize and set up the shoulder triggers, but I like to keep them simple with just a single action for each trigger. They feel just as solid as before, and their haptic feedback keeps you completely immersed. There's now something called Scout mode, which lets you magnify the center of your screen, which should be rather helpful in first-person shooters, and I'm not sure you noticed, but we're currently sitting at 120 FPS in Genshin Impact, even though the game is capped at 60 FPS. The reason for this is because there's now a frame interpolation feature, which generates new frames between existing ones for smoother motion. It's not true 120 FPS, but it certainly feels smoother, and this can be paired alongside ultra-high picture quality for a very generous bump in game resolution. Unfortunately, frame interpolation and superior picture quality is limited to just a few games. We maxed out all of Genshin Impact's in-game settings and averaged 120 FPS with interpolation enabled, and a solid 60 FPS when set to standard, which is of course the FPS cap of this game. In Real Racing 3, we managed a stable 144 FPS the whole time playing, since this game has no FPS limit. And just like with Redmagic's other recent devices, we can still hook our device up to an external 4K 144Hz monitor for that console-like experience. And now, thanks to the new chip, simultaneously running two games at the same time, one on the external display and one on the phone screen, is now even smoother than before. We also had no issues running Call of Duty Mobile at 120 FPS when set to Ultra FPS mode, but all the games I've shown you up till now had no problems maxing out FPS on previous generation flagship smartphones either. However, Call of Duty Warzone Mobile is one of the games that struggled to run on last gen chips due to its console-like graphics, but with the new Snapdragon 8 Elite paired alongside Redmagic's dedicated gaming chip, we averaged between 100 and 120 FPS most of the time, with all graphics settings maxed out of course, including peak visual quality and max field of view, whereas last year's Qualcomm chip averaged around 50 FPS on these same settings, and other 8 Elite powered smartphones average around 70 FPS on peak visual quality. Lastly, we played Withering Waves, which has a 60 FPS cap. It has quickly become the benchmark for mobile gaming, and the Redmagic 10 Pro averaged a solid 60 FPS when setting all graphical settings to their max. And while the device did get hotter than previous Redmagic phones, it was kind of expected, since the only way to cool down the inside of the phone is to dissipate hot air out the device, which means the cooling system was working at full force and I never noticed any throttling. By the way, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 averages around 40 FPS when running this game at max graphics, so there's certainly an improvement here. The Redmagic 10 Pro ships with Redmagic OS 10 out the box, which is layered over Android 15, and that's fantastic. Unfortunately, its software support isn't record-breaking by any means. The company is only promising 1 year of major Android updates, so you'll get Android 16 when that's out, but that's about it. However, you will be getting 2 years of Redmagic OS updates and 3 years of security updates. This is the global model, of course, so it's filled with Google services. Unfortunately, they replaced Google Discover to the left of the home screen with something called Zboard, but there's now Google Gemini and Gemini Live, real-time translation, and AI image editing. Unfortunately, there's no circle to search on this one. There are also no large folders, which I was really hoping to see this year, but there are still plenty of ways to customize your device, including interactive widgets. And the overall software, aside from Zboard, is very stock-like and extremely fluid when flicking around. The Redmagic 10 Pro has an identical camera setup when compared to its predecessor. The only thing that's really changed here is that it's now using OmniVision sensors instead of Samsung sensors. The selfie camera is still a 16 megapixel sensor, and there's still a pair of 50 megapixel cameras for the ultra-wide and main, but the main sensor is now a bit larger and continues to offer OIS. There's also a third camera for macro photography, and while the 2 megapixel macro sensor does a decent job, it's nothing an ultra-wide camera can't already do. The ultra-wide camera takes some very pleasing snaps, but the main sensor packs in more detail. Unfortunately, their color profiles are drastically different. The main can also zoom up to 10 times, but it's not the best. However, it takes surprisingly good portrait shots, aside from some questionable background blur. There is still no proper portrait mode when using the selfie camera, but selfie photos come out a lot, and I mean a lot better than last year, most likely because post-processing has improved. I mean, who would have thought I'd get one of my favorite selfies with my son using an under-display selfie camera. Selfies at night come out detailed, but it makes me look like a bit of an AI model, and I was once again very impressed with the ultra-wide and main camera when taking snaps at night. The main camera can still record 8K video, and it looks just as detailed as ever, aside from it being a bit unstable at times. Both the ultra-wide and main camera can record 4K video at 60 FPS, and they both come out more than detailed and pack in decent stability. It's just unfortunate that their color accuracy differs so much.
So selfie video is still not the best on the brand new Redmagic 10 Pro because obviously it's still using an under display camera, and it's kind of a compromise you have to be willing to take if you want that all screen experience. Unfortunately, it's still capped at 1080p and 30 frames per second. There's no 4K option, and unfortunately there is no bokeh video either.
Selfie video is pretty much pitch black at night unless there's a good light source, and it suffers terribly from noise grain. And as much as the ultra-wide and main camera video impressed me during the day, it wasn't quite the same case when recording at night. The cameras aren't really any better, but they aren't really any worse either. I'm just happy to see that the company has stepped up their game when it comes to selfie photo post-processing. The Redmagic 10 Pro is better in almost every way when compared to its predecessor. It has a better display with thinner bezels, a larger battery with faster charging, and is the most powerful device I have ever used, all while sticking to the exact same price. Let me know your thoughts on one of the best performing flagships of the year, and don't forget to click the link down below if you'd like to purchase one. This is TechNick wishing you all a very happy new year, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.